and how we respond to the call that's more important. Once again, we're saying that we want to respect the officials. Teammates, never do anything to embarrass our team. Once again, we encourage you to continue to interact with one another. Why? Because you're one family now. Here's what happens sometimes. You have great leaders, great parents, great coaches, great kids. But here's what happens. Sometimes one parent in the stands makes a newsworthy negative decision. Now you have what? The school name in the media. Great parents, but it just took one. So once again, we're saying that. Kind of be mindful of that. And then also self. Live up to your own standards. So once again, modeling for our kids, we don't shoot down at other people's level. We have a standard for the way we do things here, and we're going to continue to model that for our student athletes. Okay. Couple of things. Talk about the opponents in a respectful way. We want to make sure we're doing that. Also, we want to continue to show respect for the officials. All right. I will say this. I remember when I competed in high school, after a game, a parent came to me, and a parent said, "You know what, young man, you played a great game." All right. And I was kind of down because we lost. He said, "You played a great game." All right. And that helped to pick me up. Why? Because it was a parent from the opposite team. I knew it was genuine. So I'm simply saying that all the kids are ours. Right? So if kids are, giving 100%, and even sometimes when they give 100% and they're not successful, we want to make sure that we're acknowledging all our kids. How many of you have ever been at a competition or a game and you got upset? Now let me say this. In men's ministry, I teach anger management. Every Sunday with about 50, 60 men. Let me say this about anger. First of all, that emotion was given to you for a reason. There are some things that you are supposed to get angry about. Anger is supposed to bring about change. In other words, right? Anger is what's called a secondary emotion. You have a secondary, you must first have what? Primary. That's the problem. In other words, there's only 3 reasons why we get angry. 1 is unmet need. Anytime there's a need not met, it creates hurt. There's some young people that are making some bad decisions. You know why? Because they're hurting. Right? And it manifests itself in their behavior. Especially young men. They're not going to say they're hurting. Right? They just what? We call it acting out. Second is unmet expectation. Creates what? Frustration. In other words, I always say it this way. There's only a few reasons why someone doesn't meet an expectation. Here's why your child doesn't meet an expectation sometimes. 1, they didn't agree with the expectation. 2, they didn't have the skill set. Right? Or 3, they just didn't care. Right? 4, threatened esteem creates insecurity, like our self-esteem. So let me give an example. Let's just say I'm coaching, and I holler at one of my players for making a mistake. "Oh, Johnny, who are you doing? Oh!" Why did I lose control? Based on 3 reasons why we get angry. 1, expectation. I expected Johnny to make that play. He didn't make it. Now I'm what? Frustrated. 2 things I always say consider. Number 1, you can't expect what you don't teach. Did I give him enough reps? Number 2, what? What's the most important play? Next play. So I came down in, right? Is he ready for the next play now? Probably not. Because he's probably kind of down on himself. Okay? What's the other reason why I may have lost control? Based on 3 reasons I get angry. Threatened esteem creates what? Insecurity. Johnny made what? Me look bad. Now it's threatening my esteem. In other words, parents, if you don't get anything, I encourage you to think about this. Okay? As much as possible, you want to be able to separate your identity from your child's performance. Hold on to that one. As much as possible. I know it's difficult. You want to be able to separate your identity from your child's performance. In other words, give me some examples of a parent who lived vicariously through their child. What are some examples? What do you see? What do you see? Say again? Okay. Okay, too much activity from that parent. Anyone else? What are some, I call them some of the symptoms. Say again? Okay, always bragging about their child. What else? Here's one. You ever seen a parent that's on the sideline? They're always coaching their kid? Since y'all want to talk back to me. Okay. Have you ever seen a parent more upset after a loss than their child? Here's a subtle but powerful one. Right? Ready? We. There was times in high school where I competed. After the game, I go home, I hear my father on the phone. Yeah, we lost this one today. I was a very obedient child, but here's what I thought. Dad, you ain't on our team. You don't come to no practices, you don't know our plays. It's subtle but powerful. Right? So once again, we're saying that, right? You want to, as much as possible, separate your identity from what? Your child's performance. In other words, there's some things I did where later on I had to go back and apologize to my son. Say, you know, your dad is sorry. I modeled that for you. Right? But also, there's some things that he did, and here's what I told him. You did not learn that from your father. I did not model that for you. Here's what you got to remember about some teens. The fundamental question that every teen asks is this. Ready? Am I normal? The fundamental question that every teen asks is, am I normal? Now watch this. Teens do what they believe is normal. Watch this. Even if it creates a crisis. Hold on to that one. There's some things that your child does. Why? Because they believe that it's important to what? Fit in and be accepted so I can be what? Looked at as what? Normal. You know, I never tried to say this to my son. Boy, what's wrong with you? Did y'all get that? I didn't want him to think something was wrong because he's trying to do what he thinks is normal. So once again, I encourage you, right? That's why it's so important that we instill these values and think about that second goal. Right? Geometry and mastery, filling emotional tank, and honoring the game. Those are the three principles that we encourage you to kind of think about. All right? Now, what is passion? What is passion? Passion. What is passion? Say again. Okay, energy behind an emotion. Anyone else? What is passion? I like that. Desire.
The emotional motivation.
Okay, the emotional motivation. All right. Anyone else? Anything? What is passion? How many of you are passionate about something? Maybe? You're passionate about something? Okay. Here's the definition of passion. Ready? It's a heartfelt burden. Something that weighs heavy on your heart. You feel so strongly about it that it moves you in a certain direction. In other words, always say this. All right. Passion has a goal. There's 5 goals of passion. If you're passionate about something, here's what you want to think about. What is my goal? Ready? To embrace an opportunity. When I was a kid growing up, all right, my parents separated when I was like 11 years old. I went and joined the Oakland Boys Club. I'm a national trainer for Boys and Girls Club of America right now. When I was a kid, it was just boys, but fortunate, excited about having girls now. I met Coach Norman Knowles. In other words, he was passionate about coaching, but guess what? I saw him as a father figure. Right? So he embraced that opportunity of being like a father figure to me. To meet a need, that's a second goal, passion. Third, to fight for a cause. I do workshops with officers in the military. In other words, many of them join the military. Why? Because they're passionate about this country. And they're fighting for what? Our freedom. Right? To right a wrong. Sometimes the decision comes down from the court, maybe we disagree with, right? What do? We have a right to protest. And what do? The purpose of protesting is to right what we believe is wrong. The fifth and final goal really sums up passion. To make a difference or to make the world a better place. In other words, why do I do what I do? Once again, because when I was a kid growing up, I rarely got an opportunity to play sports. So I'm moving in this direction to say to coaches and parents and student athletes is, you know what? Right? Give them an opportunity to play sports and enjoy playing sports and make sure we understand that it's a co-curricular. It's an extension of the classroom. In other words, when I was a kid, everyone told me, it's extracurricular activity. No, that's not what sports is. It's a co-curricular. There's some things I learned on the athletic field that I did not learn in the classroom setting. Why? Because I had coaches and parents and teachers more focused on instilling values, work ethic, discipline, teamwork, commitment, accountability, the value of completion, preparation. All those things your child are learning through sports, and sometimes they don't even realize they're learning it. And those are the things that they're going to take away off the field to help them be successful in life. Okay? Any questions for me? Any questions for me? Yes.
Earlier we talked about feeling and draining emotional pain. We talked about nonverbals on the training.
Yes.
And I'm not like a crazy sports mom,
Okay.
but it's like a genuine reaction when a mistake is made, when you just like immediately.
Okay.
But if you're spiteful that night, that's kind of ungenuine. So like, what?
One of the things that we encourage is that we help our student athletes when we develop a mistake ritual. In other words, that's a physical cue to remind them and remind us to help them to move on. An example would be, let's just say, they made a mistake and they looked in the crowd. Maybe the crowd is saying brush it off, or maybe they're saying flush it, or maybe they're saying no sweat. And once again, we call it a mistake ritual, which means it's something that you have to what? Practice. Right? So, that's one thing to kind of think about. Anyone else? Any questions? Yes. I'm sorry? Do the kids see this presentation? I understand that moving forward, that's something that the leadership is going to do, make sure that the kids are, because we do have a Triple Impact Competitor Workshop. So moving forward, that's something that's, and once again, that's a great question. I always think it's important to start with who? The leadership and the parents, and then move forward to the kids. Anyone else? Any other questions? Yes.
It's not so much a question as much as it's a reflection.
Okay.
I've had the opportunity to be not just a parent, but also a coach. And one of the things that really resonated with me is something you said about how athletes have a tendency to want to look to see whose fault it was when something didn't go their way. And one of the things that I've found is to really work on having a conversation with them about how they see the officials. And I think it's great to show respect to the officials. But I talk about specifically about how they don't make bad calls.
Okay.
They miss calls.
Okay,
And
great.
so I talk about, just like you said, what's important next play.
Right.
I know a lot of officials and what's so important is their next call. And so, so I just think that it's really helpful to listen to what you say. I just was reflecting on was one of the pieces that I do. And so I think it's really important I get with kids.
Okay, right.
They don't make bad calls. They just miss that
They
one.
miss out. Great.
That is the bad makes sense.
Exactly.
It's not bad, it was against them.
Right. And once again, here's why I appreciate that so much. Because there are going to be some calls that don't go their way in life. flat out. And it's not going to be the call, it's going to be what? How they respond. And I always say that adversity, right, it really defines who you are when you experience that adversity. In other words, I always say that we can just kind of skip through life until adversity hit. That's when the real you show up. So once again, I think that adversity is a great teacher for our young people, especially in sports, because they face adversity throughout the entire competition. And it's a great way to kind of assess how they're responding and making sure that we have a conversation with them on how they can deal with that off the athletic field as well. Anyone else? Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I got a question. So what's your advice for communicating with the boys?
Say,
Communicating with the boys. So a lot of us are picking this up maybe for the first time.
okay,
And maybe we haven't been following the example.
Okay.
all the time.
Right.
What's
okay.
your advice for letting them know that we've got some things that we're working on?
Okay, that's a great point. I think what's important is going back to this 100-point exercise. Because number one, I would have my son or daughter go through this as well. Why? Because I need to find out what their goals are. And whatever their goals are, I want to support them with their goals, but also I want to give them an idea of what are some goals that I have for you in terms of playing sports. And so I think that's the foundation of beginning to have a conversation about being a second goal parent. So in other words, if I came up with, I want to teach you how to, my goal is for you to learn how to deal with defeat. Right? I noticed that you're having a tough time. And so I think it's a great opportunity to, throughout the year, when you go, attending games, is that you're focused on your goals and the things that you want. And when you see that, to reinforce that after the game, right? And it may not be right after, right? Because once again, we said what? Avoid those non-teachable moments. There's times where it's not time right now, right? And I think it's also okay when you're giving feedback to your child, is to ask permission. I'm curious, I know there's something you could have did differently, right? Would you like to hear? What if your child says no? Here's what they're saying. Mom, Dad, it's just not a teachable moment right now. Kids are curious enough to come back when their emotions die down. They're curious enough to come back later, right? So once again, I encourage you to kind of think about that. See the coach-parent as a partnership where you're working together to make sure your child has a good experience. Research is clear. When we work, collectively with their teachers, they do better academically. It's the same with coaching. When you're working collectively and you see it as a partnership, then what? Then they have a much more positive experience, right? And also, one thing we encourage you to do is support the coaches, right? Oftentimes as coaches, right, when we hear from parents, it's because what? Oftentimes there's something wrong or something they didn't like. So I always say, reach out to the coach. And here's what I loved about some of my parents, is that they look for opportunities to support us. In other words, when the season starts, we're so focused on the kids and getting them prepared to compete. There's times where I had parents come to me and say, hey, Coach Thomas, I noticed that, there's an area that we can help support you in. They'd run it by me and I let them know whether or not it's something that I like them to do. But I always say, look for opportunities to what? Support the coaches. Also, if you get upset about something as a parent, here's what I encourage you to do. Give it 24 hours. All right? Allow your emotions to die down. Then you can what? Have an opportunity to call a meeting and maybe meet with the coach. So once again, I encourage you, don't talk to the coach after a game, especially if you're upset. All right? A couple of things we say when it comes to intervention. Yes, if you saw a coach, physically or verbally abuse a child, right? Then you want to intervene, but we encourage you to what? Give it some time and go through the proper channels. So once again, we want to make sure we're intervening when we need to, but there's a process in how to do that as well. Okay. Any other questions? Any other questions? Now, learning how to deal with defeat. How many of you know kids who have a hard time dealing with defeat? All right, let me help you with that. A child who's having difficulty learning how to deal with defeat, here's why. They associate